Welcome back, folks. You're with another video from Mr. D. I'd like to talk to you today about the two special types of move in chess. We've gone through the basic movements of the pieces, but there are two special scenarios. The first one is to do with pawn moves. So let's have a quick look at what's going on. We have a quick pawn move here from e4 from white. You might have a move from black, say c5, perhaps they're going for the Sicilian or something like that. And now, just to set up the position, I'm going to get a pawn thrust here to e5, and we'll have a black move, say, here with f5. So this isn't a genuine opening. People are not likely to make this series of moves straight away, but it will illustrate the point we're going for. So basically, when you have a pawn on the 5th rank, remember rows are called ranks, when you've got a pawn of your own on the 5th rank, and your opponent makes a single pawn move here next to it, you would normally be allowed to take that pawn. Now, to get around this, black might sometimes try and do a double move here, as they're allowed to because it's the first move of that pawn. And sadly, that means your white pawn presumably is then not allowed to do anything with it. It can't interact. So to get around this issue, white is allowed for one move only, and it has to be on the very next move after the black makes their pawn move. They are allowed to attack this pawn whilst it was in movement. So en passant is the name of the move, and you are allowed to take that pawn even though it moved past that space. So this situation occurs when you've got a pawn on the 5th rank. So it's got to be on the 5th rank. So it's going to be in line with whichever pawns are moving out 2 spaces. So any pawn that moves out 2 spaces, which is next to you, you can take as if it was in movement, and you will move your pawn diagonally as if it had only moved a single space and take that pawn. Now, this is only allowed on the very next move after this pawn has moved. So, for example, if you were to play your knight out and then they were going to make a move, you're not then allowed to make this pawn take. It can only happen at the instant after the pawn had been moved in the first place. So straight after that, you can take, and that pawn move is known as en passant. Okay, so the setting up is 5th rank only, a double pawn move next to your pawn from your opponent. You will have a one-time only chance of taking that pawn straight away if you wish. Let's move on to the other situation. So let's have a normal sort of setup. You might have double e4, king's pawns. This is a sort of very basic-y type opening, and quite often people will be going for movements in the game to try and take over the center. We'll talk about that later. But often you'll find that your king is in the middle of the board, which is not entirely the safest of positions for it. So you are allowed, if you wish, to try and get your king a little bit more into safety, and that's using a special move called castling. Now, there are a couple of conditions to allow this to work, and basically what's going to happen is your king is going to slide 2 spaces, and your rook is going to be placed on the other side of your king. So this is what it's going to look like. I'm going to slide my king across, and the rook jumps back into position behind my king. Now, obviously, you can see the advantages instantly of this. My king is now safe up the corner. It's out the way. All the attacking down the middle is no longer aiming towards my king, so it's got a little bit of space. It also has an advantage of bringing your rook out. So, for example, I can bring now my rook into the central line and start attacking their king. So there's lots of benefits to this move, and it's a special move called castling. So, as mentioned, you would slide your king 2 spaces, and then place your rook down on the other side. For this to work, you obviously need to have moved all the pieces out of the way in between your king and your rook. You also must not be castling through check. So, for example, if my white bishop here was actually a black bishop, then it would be attacking this square here. Now, if that was the case, I wouldn't be allowed to castle through a blacker piece attacking this square. So you're not allowed to castle through check, you're not allowed to castle out of check. So if, for example, my knight here was actually a black knight and they were attacking my king, I couldn't castle to escape the check. So you can't castle through check, you can't castle out of check, and you do need to have all the pieces between the king and the rook out the way. You're also not allowed to castle if you have already moved your king. So for example, somebody had put you in check, you moved your king out of the way, and then you moved it back again later. You can't then suddenly castle. Because your king has moved, you then forfeit the right to castle later on. Now, the more astute of you might be asking, hang on a minute, if I can move my king 2 spaces to the right and castle, can I castle on the other side? And the answer to that is yes, you can. So, for example, if I start moving my pieces out on this side instead, so that we can see what's going to happen. I'm just making random moves here, which are not entirely random, but at least give you the idea. I can now, as white, I can slide again. You slide 2 spaces only. You don't go all the way in. You just slide 2 spaces. There's obviously no pieces in the way. I've moved them out of the way. My king hasn't been checked. There's no pieces attacking in the between squares. So I'm not castling through check. So 2 spaces, and then you put your rook down onto the other side. So it's going to look like this, and that would be castling queen side. The first one was castling king side across to your right. The second one is castling queen side. So you're allowed to castle either way. King's place slides 2, the rook back down on the other side. You can also do this if you're black. You can see here we've got a setup here for black, which is working. You've got the king and the rook, nothing in between. So again, they can slide their king 2 spaces and place their rook down the other side if they wish. So you can castle as both white and black. You can castle on either side, king side or queen side, 2 spaces, put the rook down on the other side, but you can't do it if you are already in check, or you're castling through check, or your king or rook have already either moved. That's the second special move. The first one was en passant. This one is castling. You now know all of the moves for chess, both the basic piece movements and the 2 special moves. We'll start looking at a few more tactics and things next time. Thank you very much.